Welcome everybody to this edition of Attention Talk Video. I'm your host, Attention Coach Jeff Copper, and with us today in our studio is Craig Surman, co-author of Fast Minds. Craig, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
This is a fascinating book, and I'm anxious to kind of get into it, but the title, Fast Minds, when I read it, it's kind of interesting because it thinks, many times I think of those with ADD having just these Ferrari kind of processors in our mind, and so Fast Minds kind of go with it, but Fast Minds is actually an acronym for something, is that right?
That's right.
Can you explain to our listeners what it stands for?
So we wanted some way of evoking what it's like to have ADHD, what the day-to-day challenges are like. And instead of a symptom list that clinicians use, we wanted to evoke, the actual sort of bumps in the road people experience. So F is forgetful, for example. A is achieving below potential. S would be stuck in a rut.
Okay.
T is time challenged. M is motivationally challenged. I is impulsive, and N is novelty seeking. D for distractible, S for scattered. And we could have chosen other words that describe the kind of frustrations people experience, but it's not meant to necessarily diagnose. It's meant for people to say, hey, I've got these kinds of challenges. I want to know what the best evidence is or what will help me. One
of the things that stands out to me is, impulsive and distractibility. Those are common characteristics associated with ADD, but I really liked novelty seeking. That's not something you hear every day, but it stands out because in my work with people, many of those with ADD can focus on things that are new, exciting, and stimulating, that are really kind of novel. So I like how you put that in there, and certainly stuck in a rut and time challenged also in there. So I think it's a really kind of clever acronym that kind of frames out the book.
Thank you.
I have to tell you, Craig, one of the great things about being the host of Attention Talk Video and Attention Talk Radio is I get to interview the experts, and I frequently get people who send me books on things. And one of the things that fascinates me about when you wrote this book, there's a lot of worksheets and questions kind of interwoven throughout the book. Was that premeditated?
We wanted people to figure out a personalized strategy as they go through the book. We're capturing different kind of challenges people have and then trying to bring them to solutions for those challenges. And we really don't think that it's one size fits all. So when I work one-on-one with people, I kind of know what their deal is, what their strengths are, what their challenges are, and can tailor the conversation. In a book, it's harder to have a conversation. We want people to sort of direct that conversation themselves. If a chapter doesn't apply to them, they go to a different chapter. So we create an appendix of all the different worksheets in the book at the back. People can kind of just go to that and say, hey, look, this applies to me, and read the book backwards if they need to. We wanted people to have what I call a choose-your-own-adventure experience. If they find something they already know, they move on. And it really seems to me that people learn in different ways. I think we all sort of know that from our own experience. And I'll tell you that so many people tell me that if they're writing things down, that they're just processing it better. They can pay attention to it. Some people tell me that if they're studying, they've got to take notes as they read. So it was that kind of experience that I think really informed us wanting to have someplace people could put down, yes, this applies to me. I want to come back to this. Yep.
Well, what I like about it is you kind of highlighted on, we all learn different ways. There's different modalities, but you're engaging more than just reading. You've got writing and kind of review that's going in there, which really makes a lot of sense to me. But also what strikes me is on Attention Talk Radio, we did an interview March of 2012 with Dr. Russell Barkley on his executive function deficit disorder construct. And in that interview, we were talking about the level 1 thinking tools, and one of the things that he talked about was externalizing information, getting it out so you can begin to manage it. And we talked a whole bunch of stuff about this, and what strikes me is these worksheets and stuff really kind of prompt and enable people with ADD to externalize that information so they can begin to see it. And the other piece of it too is by putting it on paper, it kind of removes some of the emotion of it and makes it really kind of real, which to me really makes a lot of sense. And one of the things that I wanted to highlight in the show, if you're going to get engaged in these things and if you want them to work, you really got to participate. And Craig, from what I see, these worksheets are designed just to do that.
That's right. You see workbooks, and I think if it gives an opportunity for people to organize information in a way that they can process it. but I was very conscious that for some people, that's not the best way to process information. I really struck that many people need to talk things through. I think other people need to, draw diagrams. And I like to actually ask people, how they learn best.
Yes.
Uh,
In my practice, the first thing that we do in the first session is they take a learning exercise, and we begin to kind of sit down and try to understand how they naturally learn to process information in their mind. I do that because however they do that in their internal world will give us clues on their external worlds. But what I really like about this book is you are externalizing. The people are kind of getting engaged, and to me, this really what makes a lot of sense if a person's really going to take this information and digest it. Furthermore, as you're highlighting, is everybody's different, and in this book it frames some things out, but really what you're doing here is you're not giving a list of the top 10 obvious solutions for everybody. What I understand from this is you're encouraging everybody to seek and find their own individual solution. Is that, am I reading that right?
Yeah, that's right. I'm really frustrated when people give, the 3 solutions to being more organized or to having more engaged life. I think that there are principles, and many of them stand the test of the kind of behavioral therapy that we do here at Mass General and has been studied, at other institutions. And it's not that there's one key set of principles, for everybody, but we have found some common themes. Things like, you got to have a way of managing distractions. Things that are on your mind that are distracting you, whether it's emotions or things that should be on a to-do list. Things in your environment that are distracting you. Just as an example. But what is distracting to one person is not the same as what's distracting to another person.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think before we chatted just before we were going to do this interview, and I explained there was a woman I was working with at one point in time who was very sensitive to sound, and I mean,
right.
We all get distracted by sound, but she was very sensitive, and it became something where we used white music to drown out distracting sounds and or earplugs in public places, and that's a solution that really, really worked for her, but wouldn't necessarily work for everybody else. And what's interesting to me is that particular solution wouldn't be found in the top 10 list of obvious solutions. And one of the things, I have a pet peeve is when people print those lists, it puts blinders on to everybody not to find their own unique solution. And what I really like about this book is I think it's cleverly put together, but the notes and stuff to engage people and the emphasis on trying to find what works for you individually.
And another principle along those lines that I think is very important is how people engage things is a little different, but to me it all comes down to thinking about how our prefrontal cortex works. So we kind of organized it around the idea of, there's only so much you can hold in mind in a moment.
Yep.
And when people jump from thought to thought or intention to intention, that it's just very clear that there's only so much you can hold in a moment. And this is an active process of the prefrontal cortex to keep on a track of intention. And we think about it almost like an Etch-a-Sketch. It gets easily shaken, what you're planning to do from the mind. And so externalizing a plan is just so powerful. It can be very hard for people to implement and do, especially if their ADHD is not treated. But having it clear in your mind is one thing. Having it on paper so you can keep it clear in your mind, I think is another, on a planner or on a schedule.
And just one other thing that just kind of strikes me out, just to emphasize what you're saying is there's the ADD brain. You've got the knowledge side, like to be described. That's kind of the back half. That's you go to school, you get an education,
right.
You're transferring knowledge,
right.
And many ADDers they love knowledge, but the prefrontal cortex is about the execution of that knowledge. And just
right.
to re-emphasize this, you can read the books all day long, but it's actually executing what you're trying to do. And again, what I really like about this book and what I think is powerful, and not about this book, but just for the message out there, if you're going to engage in anything, you need to externalize, you need to get engaged and write this stuff down. And again, by doing that, I think it makes a lot of sense. And one other kind of comment is, to me, this is a stepping stone. We talk about metacognition and the mental health world, about thinking about what you're thinking, which is a little bit higher level. But by writing this down, it takes a step in that direction. Do you want to just touch on that a little bit?
Well, I love the word metacognition, which is sort of thinking about thinking, and it's really quite remarkable. Whether it's anxiety or depressed thoughts or organizational struggles, that some process of stepping back and sort of observing the pattern is so powerful, because it switches from sort of grappling with whatever the thing is to sort of having some space to sort of, and I think we talked about it before, Jeff, that just sort of pause and say, this is a pattern I tend to be in. What's my strategy for this pattern? And that, I think cognitive behavioral therapy has done a great service to help people think about moments and whether or not they can implement better habits, not just of action, but of mind in those moments.
A big fan of what you're saying. On Attention Talk Radio, we did an interview one time with Barbara Luther and Dr. Ari Tuckman talking about the difference between ADHD coaching and cognitive behavioral therapy. And one of the things that I learned from that, Dr. Tuckman, was we were talking about the background and how those two thought theories are kind of coming together, and so much so at one point in time we were talking about where did something come from. He says, listen, let's forget about that. A good idea is a good idea. And from my background, from a coaching background, and what you're saying from behavioral therapy, it's really tied together. It really makes a lot of sense. And again, that's what I want to emphasize that strikes me about this book and makes it special. Craig, for those that are interested in obtaining the book, they can go to ADHDfastminds.com to get information, but they can also go to Amazon.com in order.
Yeah, it's available for e-readers as well on iTunes and through Barnes & Nobles for the Nook, and the Penguin Groups put this out in a lot of different formats. It's very gratifying that it's out there for people.
Awesome. So you can go get there, and everybody, Craig, you want to tell? There's some bio information that's going to be posted under this video, but you just want to tell them a little bit about yourself, just real briefly, your background.
I'm a neuropsychiatrist at Harvard Medical School and Mass General, and I've coordinated the adult ADHD research program here. So there's a number of colleagues I've worked with, and we've done clinical trials with medication. We've done behavioral therapy studies. My own area of particular interest is understanding the organizational challenges that people have. Some of my work's looked at how individuals with ADHD tend to have challenges with their daily rhythms, things like going to bed on time, things like how eating disorders are impacted. Does it impact eating patterns? And also how it impacts sort of regulation of emotional expression. These are all sort of issues of control and self-regulation that have been debated in the field as whether they should be considered part of attention deficit disorder or not. And so one thing we've looked at is whether they're explained by other conditions. And what you see is a subset of people who really have more challenges than the classic mind wandering in class or restlessness. They also tend to have some trouble navigating interpersonal interactions emotionally and how they express themselves, or with sleep patterns, or if they have eating disorders, for example, a higher risk of something like bulimia nervosa. So I've also focused more recently on the idea of nutraceuticals, and these are agents which are supportive of brain function that may prove, with enough research, to offer alternative or supplement to some of the standard sort of medication treatments for ADHD.
Got it. Well, again, everybody, go out to ADHDfastmind.com or go to Amazon or whatever and get it. It's Fast Mind by Craig Surman. And Craig, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Really appreciate the opportunity, Jeff. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Just tune in. Keep tuning in to AttentionTalkVideo.com for our next video. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.